and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Kermit Whitfield, a member of CMC's board and the AVP of Communications for United Way of Central Ohio. It's great to see everyone here today, and we have a full room. Today's forum, State of Downtown, is sponsored by the Robert Weiler Company, Central Ohio Transit Authority, and the Edwards Companies. Each of our sponsors have many guests and associates in the audience today, so won't you please help me thank them. If you want to know about what is going on in our downtown, there is no better source than the Capitol Crossroads Special Improvement District. And its report on the state of downtown is the gold standard for data and analysis. For the second year, Capitol Crossroads is launching its report exclusively at the Columbus Metropolitan Club, which means everyone here today will be hearing news in the making. And I guess everyone else will just have to wait to read about it in the paper tomorrow. Now, let's learn more from our experts. Please welcome Deputy Director of Research, Planning, and Facilities for the Discovery and Capitol Crossroads Special Improvement Districts, Mark Conti, the founder of downtown business Flying Gent, Brandon Givend, although he can also have it pronounced Givand, if you like that. A voice for transportation and planning, Vice President of Government Affairs and Strategic External Communications for the Central Ohio Transit Authority, Laura Kaprowski, and a local developer, President of Tomco Company, Michael Tomco, and Executive Director of the Discovery and Capitol Crossroads Special Improvement Districts, Cleve Ricksecker. Mark is going to start us off with a look at the data, and then Cleve will lead the panel discussion. Mark, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks to the Columbus Metropolitan Club for hosting us again this year to release the annual State of Downtown report, and it's an honor to be here, and thank you all for attending. As Kermit mentioned, I'm with the Capitol Crossroads and Discovery Special Improvement Districts. These two districts were created by property owners within downtown to provide services in the public realm, including cleaning, safety services, beautification, and promotions and advocacy. I hope that you've seen or interacted with some of our ambassadors. They're uniformed ambassadors out on the street, either in blue, yellow, or red uniforms. These are the folks that are really out there day to day keeping downtown clean and safe. And then putting this report together was a team effort in our office. So I do want to thank the entire CID staff, all of which I think are here right now. Thank you for helping put this report together. The full report is available online at downtowncolumbus.com, and you'll find a placemat in front of you that's probably covered with salad dressing now, which is okay, as long as it's not on my face. Has some highlights for the report. So in most cases in the report and today, for downtown purposes, we consider that largely the area bounded by three highways, 71, 670, and 70, and over to the west, picking up the Scioto Peninsula to the railroad tracks. The overall state of downtown continues to remain strong. It's certainly evidenced by the multitude of cranes we see all over the place and the steady stream of new announcements of new projects. And in fact, the announcements are coming so quickly that this report was out of date before we could even get it to the printer, which is wonderful. I just want to touch on a couple of the sectors within downtown that we track. First is housing and residence. Our housing market is continuing to chug along. We have 1,040 housing units under construction. We have another 3,400 units proposed. I estimate right now our downtown population is 8,400, and we'll probably cross the 10,000 resident threshold sometime in 2020. Now, for comparison, this is all great, and we're going to finally hit that 10,000 mark, but for comparison, downtown's peak was 30,000 residents back in 1950, and we went down to 3,500 residents in the year 2000. Downtown's new apartments continue to fill up. Thanks to data from Vote Strategic Insights, I'm able to report that the apartment occupancy rate right now is at 93%, which is better than the regional average. And yes, people are still moving into all these new apartments, which is wonderful. On the for sale side, there were 73 new condo sales last year with a median sales price of approximately $613,000. This is the highest number of new closings we've had since 2008. However, back in 2008, we had a wider variety of price offerings, and our median sales price was $340,000. In 2018, we're going to see some great projects come to the market, including 80 on the Commons, which is the last available developable site on Columbus Commons. And we're also going to see new apartments come online from Lifestyle Communities. In fact, the GOAT, the bar that they're offering, is already open right now on the ground floor at Rich and High. And then the View on Grant, repurposing an old warehouse that Ballet Met used to own. This is all wonderful, certainly, but downtown has acres and acres and acres to grow. You can see on your placemat in the lower left-hand corner the residential density of downtown versus some surrounding neighborhoods. And while our density is improving, we're still not quite to the point of a lot of our Columbus neighborhoods that we would consider urban, like German Village in the Short North. Next, I wanted to touch on the office market. Looking at data from CBRE, the overall downtown vacancy rate is 13.2%, up from 12% a year ago, but this is largely due to some new product coming online and very slow absorption of the new space that's been added to the market. Now, buildings around Capitol Square continue to struggle a little more than the rest of downtown. I gathered some office availability data from CoStar, and it's on the lower right-hand corner, if I got that right. No, I flipped those, didn't I? So this is on the lower left-hand corner of the placemat. You can see the office availability. Now, office availability is the amount of space that's on the market being offered up for lease. So this might be some space that's occupied right now, but the tenant's planning on moving elsewhere. So for Capitol Square, the availability rate is up at 26%, while for all of downtown, it's only at 17%. But there are two things coming along that I think are going to turn that story around. Owners around the square are going headstrong and making a lot of investments in their buildings. The Huntington Center, One Columbus, Capitol Square Office Tower, all these buildings have secured financing and are either planning or already doing new investments that are underway right now to update their buildings. The former Dispatch building over at 34 South 3rd Street, that's undergoing renovation, and they've secured a major tenant. Michael Tomko, one of our panelists, he's working hard on the Hayden, two historic buildings at 16 and 20 East Broad, and putting those back on the market soon. And then the office buildings around the square are also going to benefit from downtown CPass, the new transit pass initiative from Capitol Crossroads in partnership with CODA and the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. This program is going to start on June 1st, and an estimated 45,000 employees within the Capitol Crossroads district are going to be able to get free transit passes through their employer. That alone should help free up 2,500 parking spaces within the first 3 months of the program. We think over time it'll free up even more parking. This is going to allow more office space to be leased in areas with the tightest parking constraints. Right now, our last remaining block of parking, and it's shrinking fast, is over near Columbus Commons and in the Columbus Commons garage. That's going to get filled once 80 on the Commons comes online later this year. If our development potential within downtown is going to be defined by how many cars we parked, then growth in downtown is going to be stifled, and it's actually then going to start driving up the cost of development even higher, especially for housing projects. I want to make sure I have time for the panel, so I'm going to start there. There is a lot more data on the housing and office markets in the report, and there's more data on all the other sectors: employment, retail, hospitality, education, and transportation. And a reminder that you can get this on downtowncolumbus.com. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. As I look around the room, I'm just stunned at the number of friends of downtown that there are in this audience. So I think we're preaching to the choir today. There's a lot to talk about. There's very little time, so I'll get right to it. First question for the panel is the following. Some people believe that older office buildings in downtown, particularly in the core of downtown, are obsolete. The floor plates are too small, the office space is dated, and so forth. Are they?
That's nonsense. Sound like Shaquille O'Neal when I said that. That's pretty cool. I like that.
Got the right voice to do that.
Well, we do have a big demand for that. If you take a look at all the businesses and all the tenants downtown, only 20% of them have staffs larger than 20 people. So there's a big market right now for the people who are downtown to have smaller space.
CODA, and maybe think of us when we're talking about repurposing historic buildings, but our downtown headquarters is actually a historic building. And we made the choice a number of years ago that we were going to come back to, we were going to come downtown, we were going to be at Broad and High, wonderful location. We've made it work for us, 10 floors. In fact, we actually lease out a couple of our floors to other tenants. So, you know, you can make historic buildings very current and they can fit your needs.
Is that true, Michael?
Absolutely. One of the items in the report is that creative office space has a vacancy rate of only about 5% downtown, right? And so I think that shows that if you take these older buildings and you update them, you basically bring them to a modern use, there's tremendous demand. There's actually pent-up demand. 5% for office is remarkably low. There are very few office markets nationwide that see those kind of numbers globally. And so, you know, I would also mention that in terms of some of the buildings that aren't historic but are a little bit older, the office towers, you look at the Huntington Center, it's 35 years old, and it's doing extremely well, you know, 85+% occupancy historically, and it's because they continue to reinvest and put money back into it and are always forward thinking. You know, there are newer towers that do have problems, and that's usually due to a lack of reinvestment and a lack of sort of ability to accommodate the tenants, the sort of offices that people want downtown, and just a lack of reinvestment.
Okay.
You know, one other thing,
Yeah,
they
please.
do make great bars, right? I mean, there's the Buckeye Bourbon on Gay Street, and then Citizens Building just opened up with Veritas in the bottom and a really cool bar on top, so.
Okay, good bars.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question now that I asked last year. I feel obliged to ask that question on all of your behalf, and that is, why isn't there more retail in downtown? Where is it?
Why is there no retail? Well, I think to answer that question, you have to presume that there is a demand for retail. And I think you can't create demand, either it's there or it's not. For example, if you go to a strip mall in Worthington or an old Westerville or East End, like there's retail, and there's retail everywhere, right? Or short north of Grandview. Like, you're not begging for people to come be retailers, right? But it seems like we're begging people to come downtown, and why is that? So I think we have to ask different questions to get different results, right? So why do people not want to open up downtown? Why do people not want to shop downtown? Are both of those things true? Possibly, or at least to some degree, right? So I think, you know, from a development standpoint, we look at things like, okay, maybe retailers want to be clustered together. Maybe they need smaller spaces. Maybe they need ready-to-go white box spaces. Maybe. And I think we've tried a lot of those things, right? And it hasn't yielded, it's yielded some results, but not a whole lot. If you remember Columbus in the past 10 years, past 20 years, or past 30 years, I mean, you've seen growth and development, but you really haven't seen the leaps and bounds growth. I mean, hell, Easton, in a 20-year period, has become a whole city unto itself, right? So if you want retail and you want development, you can have it. So you have to look at the things that are preventing that. So I just don't think there's, I mean, it's a whole different conversation for a different day, honestly, because I think it gets pretty deep into the fabric of who we are in Columbus. But I think it's a cultural thing we're dealing with downtown, and who lives downtown. And you said, where are we at, like 8,000, 9,000 residents roughly, and apartments going up every day. So who lives in those apartments, right? And for me as a retailer, I thought that I would be amassing more local, sorry if I'm talking, it's kind of my category, but amassing more local shoppers of support at a higher rate than, say, adding one customer every 3 months locally. Most of my customers come from out of town, New York, Chicago, LA, DC, London, wherever. But locally, what I've noticed is, and just being downtown every day for 24 hours a day for the past 10 years, is people aren't expecting retail, right? So when you walk down the street, you're walking down High Street, people are kind of like this, right? And you're dealing with vacancies, which is fine, we're fixing that, but there's just not an expectation that you're gonna see anything, right? So you go to Easton, you park your car and you walk around, you don't really have a plan. We're going shopping, or you're going out, you're going to experience the neighborhood. No one does that downtown.
I want to ask then,
Yeah.
follow up on that. I want to ask, what is preventing retail in downtown?
You know, I think a lot of it is just sort of developer and landlord expectations regarding retail. You know, I think if you're managing an office tower downtown from a spreadsheet, retail doesn't always look like a great proposition. You know, you expect that, you know, if you have residential or office opportunity, it'll fill much more quickly than a retail tenant. You're going to face more turnover in terms of retail. But, you know, when you're looking at these opportunities, I would say look to the short north, and specifically what companies like the Woods companies have done. You know, They build small spaces, they white box those spaces, and they continue to reinvest in the retail because they understand that high quality retail will bring a certain cachet to the buildings, which you were just talking about, the Citizens Bank building. You can associate a great restaurant and bar with it, right? And so I think that probably on the development side, people need to think a little bit more globally and a little bit long-term about what these retail opportunities will do. And I would also say that on the pedestrian side of things, like you mentioned, when you have so many people who are driving downtown, right? It's basically they're going from point A to point B in their cars. They don't really have a certain experience in downtown. If you have more people taking the bus, walking, they'll experience their neighborhoods a little bit differently. Walking is about the journey more than destination sometimes. And so I think that would be tremendous for retail to have more people interacting with the city differently.
And I'd add, just because you guys come from a development standpoint, maybe there might be a disconnect too in where we look at downtown and where we are in our continuum, in our timeline. Are we at this point? Are we at that point? A lot of times we keep moving the field, we keep moving the goalposts, right? And we all think we're here and we're actually not there. And then we reevaluate in 5 years, like we're actually here and we're not there. And we reevaluate in 10 years, we're actually here. But for the people that are actually there, living it every day, for their livelihoods, you kind of know where you are. You don't have to ask anyone where we are. So I think that was a great point from like when you're looking at spreadsheets and you're kind of not down there, it's harder to tell. But my question would be is where do we want to be? Like, what is retail, right? What is small business? Who do we want? Do we have a concise vision of that, or is it just kind of like, hell, anybody who can pay?
Right. How do we get there? How do we get there?
Well, again, to point to the wood companies, they have a half dozen art galleries in the short north that they could probably move out tomorrow and put in, national credit tenants. But they don't do that because they're reinvesting in the neighborhood. There are synergistic effects for the office, for the retail. And that's why I would like to see more downtown developers basically have skin in the game with retail. Maybe have lower base rents and a revenue share or something like that, but basically share some of the risk and share some of the accountability in terms of bringing more retail to market and making retail a viable proposition, because there are a lot of retailers who I think have some interest in downtown, would be amenable to trying it, but if you're demanding a 5-10 year lease, huge setup costs, you don't want to do any work in the building, it's not going to be an attractive proposition for retailers.
Well, and to just disagree a little bit with Brandon, I'm not sure we have seen a lot of prepared white boxed clustered, affordable space any time in downtown.
Affordable, I didn't say.
Okay, but also clustered. I mean, the very ingredients you need for retail, we just don't see or haven't seen in downtown, and maybe it's happening. Mark, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, over the next 18, 24 months, we'll see more space come online, but it's still going to be up to the landlord then to determine, are they going to wait for that national credit tenant, or are they going to divide up the space and get it ready for small retailers? And then the other point I would emphasize that Michael brought up was the issue of car ownership of people who live downtown. So if you have a car, why would you walk over to the hills when you're going to get in your car, maybe drive to Kroger, or a lot of people are even going to drive up to Polaris to Costco?
And those are the cultural things I'm mentioning right there. Like, those aren't things you just fix overnight. Like, I don't care how many retailers you put on the street, if you can still get in your car and go to Easton and get everything you need in an hour, you know what I mean? So I think a lot of times we look at the stats and it says like, well, we have this many people living downtown, and they, like, for example, just how we look at data, for example, we have, what did it say, $55 million in retail. I'm the retail. I sure as hell don't have $55 million. This is an example, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, $20 million in home goods. I'm that too. I'm the home goods store, and I sure as hell. So what data? I think we're just looking at the investment and the stats and the data. And also a small thing is like on retail specifically, I noticed that in the report, we also rolled in restaurants and bar to retail. That's a little disingenuous. So I think we kind of justify this number to create this number to get this investment to satisfy this, to do that, and it's just not necessarily true. So restaurants, that's a whole different category. But retail, like I said, like if there's $55 million that I'm supposed to have, I can give you my checking and routing account number.
Right. So I'm going to move on now and talk a bit about. I'm always funniest when I don't intend to be funny. Talk about why we should even care about downtown. And the question really is, why does the location of a job in downtown versus the urban fringe make a difference? Why should we care if jobs are located in downtown as opposed to the outer belt?
All right, I'll start. Well, it's really in a lot of ways the greenest place to do business. So often you're going to see articles about new LEED certified buildings getting built on greenfields, yet every single employee has to drive there. And so whatever environmental savings they've done with the building, you've now negated with people's daily commutes. And with a job center, the largest job center in the region in downtown, it's accessible in all directions, probably the easiest commutes for everybody concerned in all directions. Plus we have the other transportation options like biking, walking, and transit. And in addition to that, if somebody's working downtown, they're going to tend to live closer to where they work. And so we're not going to, the more jobs we have downtown, the fewer greenfields we're then going to see eaten up by new development way, way beyond the outer belt.
Well, I would, as a planner kind of person, I would agree with Mark wholeheartedly, but also as someone who's had my entire career working downtown, I mean, it's such a unique place and feel. And getting prepared for this forum, I asked a lot of people from teenagers, middle-aged to older people, I mean, what do they think about downtown? And it's incredible, the thoughts, the feelings, the comments, and in the end I thought, gosh, there is a lot of pressure at downtown. It means a lot to a lot of people. In fact, it's kind of like being the quarterback at Super Bowl, right? I mean, there's just a lot on the shoulders of downtown to deliver, but it's who we are at the end. I feel like it can represent a lot of this region because people come from all over. And it's really important that we do think about how it speaks and how it makes people feel and live their lives to play and work and also for school.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I believe like the heartbeat of any city is its downtown. And, you know, you Google a city or a postcard, that's what you see is a skyline, you know. No offense to any of the parts of town, but you don't see Grandview or Franklinton or you know, whatever. You see the skyline, right? So I just had a nice conversation with Cleve at the table. Found out he's from Gallion, near my hometown, Mansfield, and Steve Tucker over there, also Mansfield guy. And my wife's from Youngstown. We started talking about Youngstown, and his parents are from Youngstown. And I mentioned how that even with the loss of industry, they're reviving and bringing in like tech. They're attracting tech talent, right? And Cleve mentioned that there's a real heartbeat and there's a real energy around the university around there, right? So I thought about that, like that's kind of what it is. So the where isn't as important to like the what that's there. So people want to, if jobs are more important to be centrally located downtown because there should be a heartbeat here. I think we deserve a real neighborhood and a real experience. And not that you can't get that elsewhere, but I think it's important that Columbus as a city focuses on concentrating that downtown.
Absolutely. In addition to being the heartbeat of Columbus, you want the downtown to be sort of the center of gravity. When you talk to employers, you know, if they're located up off of Polaris Parkway, right, that's really convenient for the employees who live in Delaware, but think about how difficult it is for someone who lives in Hilliard, for example, to get out there. And so I think that this, you know, some of the suburban areas of Columbus, their fortunes rise and fall with our downtown. You know, if our center of gravity shifts more and more towards the north side, the east side of town, that's going to have a lot of negative impacts. But you know, one other thing about being downtown is that it's not always the easiest option. And so if your model for, and your office's model is basically, you know, people drive in at 9 a.m. and they leave at 5 p.m. and they drive home, you're not really getting the most out of being downtown. In many ways, it would be easier to be in a suburban area. So that's, again, why I think retail is such a crucial component of this, the restaurants, all sort of the lifestyle things, the cultural events, the parks. That's sort of what makes downtown a special place. And you hope that more and more employers and people working downtown experience that side of downtown and not just sort of the four walls of their office.
You know, that actually makes me think of a question. That is there a connection between living and working downtown and civility and personal health?
My gut tells me yes, but I'm not I haven't done all the research on, I mean, certainly the issue of civility.
This isn't a research question. It's a gut question.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I would agree too. I mean, health-wise, you're going to walk. You're going to get out and walk more, which is always good for everyone. Now, civility, I'm not sure. For me, when I'm walking on the streets, you come across all kinds of people. who not just, many don't live in downtown Columbus, but they're coming downtown for services. Maybe, it's to see the dentist, but maybe it's for mental health services and maybe to work. And I think we have an opportunity in downtown to embrace all kinds of people, for sure.
I say that I asked that question in part because some of my best civility experiences have been on COTA buses, that I've learned more about more people riding COTA buses than virtually any place at all. And it's so important to have common experiences, to ride public transit, to go to public parks instead of private TV rooms and private vehicles. That it seems to me there is a civility that you learn being in the public realm.
Well, and turning it back to research, some research I did do a few years ago, I took a look at the psychographic data for the downtown workforce to see, was there one segment of the population of the downtown workforce that was really dominant over the others? And the psychographics, that gets into the funny demographic terms that people use, like the young digerati and things like that you'll read about periodically. And the amazing thing was there was no one dominant type of worker downtown in terms of where they live, what they buy, what their views are. We really do have a huge diversity when it comes to the workforce downtown. So you are, as a downtown worker, being exposed to a lot more different people than you would be probably anywhere else.
May I ask how many people in this room live downtown? Raise your hands. Decent amount. So is everyone else not civil or not healthy? It's a valid question because I feel like, I think the real answer is like the urban experience, not maybe necessarily the downtown.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. So if you live in Clintonville, those are some of the most civil and healthy people out there.
Is that true?
But I definitely agree. I think if more of us shared common experiences, especially through public transit and public spaces and retail and all those type of things, I think we can better understand each other for sure and live a healthier lifestyle. And especially with the trails and the KOGO and all those type of things added in there, it makes a lot of sense. It's very cohesive together.
Now, I have a very important question to ask. So often we hear objections in Columbus to projects that are considered to be too dense. Is density bad? Really? No answers?
Well, I think you have to look at the context of the density, right? If you're replacing a surface parking lot, you're downtown, you have sort of the infrastructure to support it, there's a way that it makes sense, yeah, that's great. On the historic preservation side, I do worry about some historic buildings that may have been underutilized historically, and people look at them as sort of opportunities to raise the building and do basically a whole new ground-up redevelopment. And so I don't think density is a bad thing. I think that, in fact, I do office development primarily. I love to see the residential density. It contributes tremendously to the vibrancy of downtown. It makes the office market that much stronger, not only in terms of people who would prefer to work downtown because of accessibility, but also because of all the things that a robust residential environment supports. So, when surface parking lots are still so common throughout downtown, I have a hard time worrying about density.
And I don't think density is bad. The problem is really bad design. That a lot of times when we've seen very dense projects, there hasn't been much attention paid to the design or even the details of the design. So it doesn't end up really adding anything more to the community. And what's unfortunate, I mean, granted in downtown, thankfully we have a architectural review commission. In neighborhoods without architectural review, they're kind of at the whims of what happens. And so fighting density might be their only option.
I think that density, we really do need to embrace it, but within context. I mean, growing by 1 million more people by 2050, a lot of those people are going to be attracted and coming downtown, and it's going to be necessary. It's also for sustainability reasons, as I think Mark had talked earlier. I mean, we really are going to get the biggest bang for our buck if we are building and developing where the infrastructure already exists.
That's 3 for 3. I'm going to be 4 for 4. I agree. The context is everything. Density is not a bad word. I think we've already decided in Columbus a long time ago that density was a bad word. That's kind of why we're at where we're at right now. We've kind of just kept sprawling and growing and growing and growing. You can have all the space you want. You can get in your car, go where you want. So I think we're trying to reverse engineer that and kind of fix that. So like for me as a retailer, density is everything. Like my success is dependent and tied to density. Like you go to a very large city, those retailers and those restaurants are not relying upon anybody from the other side of town, and I am. And that's problematic. So I think density in just about every sense is great.
And you know, Brent, when you mention that, transit also works better with density. So there's,
Great
I mean,
point.
there are a lot of things that work better. It's not all, you know, bad to think about tall buildings and having them close proximity. Actually, it brings around a lot of benefits.
That's a great point.
Good segue for my next question. In what ways are CODA and the new CPAS program important to downtown and the workforce, the region's workforce?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you, Cleve. Thanks to Mark and, you know, the entire SID organization and board, because what a creative idea and risk-taking. I mean, it's been, I know it wasn't an idea that was just dreamed up a few months ago, and the partnerships, too, that it created with MORPC. It's a game changer. Right? I mean, as soon as this kind of got out there to a broader audience and really beyond the state of Ohio, it's caught a lot of attention. So that's one thing that it means. I think that the other thing is that it's going to give people that have maybe not thought about working downtown because of the type of jobs that they seek, meaning lower income jobs, lower paying jobs. Now they have an opportunity. They have a broader job market. I think also what it's going to do is we're going to be thinking about transit a lot differently. And I just have to say that CODA's ready for it. We did our transit system redesign. It was almost a year ago. So downtown has more routes throughout downtown, higher frequency now, not just on High Street, but Front Street, 3rd and 4th. And then finally, I just say, you know, I really hope that we kind of have this timid, fickle feeling about transit. You know, we love C-Bus. We're super excited about downtown CPAS. But sometimes we don't quite know what to do with this bus stop right in front of my building. And I really just hope that this Downtown Pass program, you know, reinforces that's an asset. That is something that you have to capitalize on and to draw talent and to make the most of it, because who knows what will happen, particularly with that transit stop. Maybe there'll be some new purpose coming our way with Smart Columbus.
Now, before any more responses, I just want to say that we will move to audience questions in a minute. So don't be shy. Line up at the microphone, and we'll continue then on this particular question.
That's what I like about the CPAS program is that it basically gives an incentive to move off the default paradigm for a lot of employers, which is we pay for everybody's parking. You know, the prices continue to go up for parking, and that's not the worst thing. If you talk to a lot of parking operators in town, they'll say, we don't really have a shortage of parking. We have a shortage of willingness to pay. And providing people an alternative that's feasible, I think is a fantastic thing. You know, I've talked to hotel operators in downtown who say they have a huge problem. They hire people, they train them, they get them onboarded, and those people realize it's not economically feasible for them to get downtown. And so they end up taking jobs outside of downtown, often outside the outer belt, simply because that's more affordable. CPAS bridges a lot of gaps, and frankly, I think it gives employers something to point to instead of, you know, subsidizing parking. You know, if you have 5 people per 1,000 square feet, office is getting denser and denser. A lot of times, if you're subsidizing parking wholly, especially on Capitol Square, your cost for parking will be 50% of your total rent cost, inclusive of utilities and everything else. So that's an absurd number, and when you can point to something else and say, this is a program, then maybe you don't have to pay $200 a month for a monthly parking pass for someone who lives in German Village and is really, you know, under a mile away. There's another way to get things done.
Yeah, and as everyone's mentioned already, I mean, there's going to be that economic benefit for the low-income worker, the economic benefit for the frugal person who of any income. You do have the health benefit. You are going to walk more when you take the bus to work. You're going to walk to your stop and then walk to your job. And you are going to then start incorporating just walking, some basic active transportation into your daily activities. If we could get more cars off the road for commutes, we're going to see better air quality. You know, hopefully we can see a reduction in the number of air quality alerts we get here in the summer. I mean, all the way around, no matter how you look at it, this is going to be really positive for the community.
I appreciate the work that the Planning Commission and Special Improvement and CODA do for transportation and that they're always thinking about new solutions. And if we didn't have people thinking outside the box to come up with solutions like that, like we'd be in a world of hurt in the future. So I definitely appreciate that. Anybody trying to move people from A to B and get people downtown, like I'm all for it. That's the top line. People have their jobs. I'm the bottom line guy. Like I'm the cultural guy. So I want to challenge everybody to change their habits and lifestyle, because at the end of the day, if it's just competition, right? Like there's offices that still move out to the suburbs because there's parking. So culturally, if you can't convince an office or someone to hop on the bus, there's not a whole lot you can do, So there's incentives we can do, but I think we got to look at it a multi-pronged approach to be able to have people on the top line coming up with solutions, but also ways to, maybe it's making it more inconvenient, to drive. Maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe cheaper parking isn't the answer. Maybe more parking garages is. I don't know. But I just know we have a severe cultural issue that I don't know how to fix, but we can't forget about addressing that too.
Okay, audience questions. State your name, please, and ask a question, and no editorializing.
Well, thank you. My name is Shoshana Goldberg Miller, and I'm a professor at The Ohio State University. And I write about creative cities, so perfect segue. Thank you so much. What I wanted to say is that there's really a return to downtown that I've been researching, and it has to do with both young people wanting to be in a walkable place and also baby boomers wanting to come and leave those big nests that they had. Second, I wanted to mention that Short North, one of the things that happened there was—
Is there a question?
Yes. Was that creatives were there. You had a lot of galleries. You had a lot of density with people walking. So in Dumbo, Brooklyn, what they did there is that Two Trees Management took a lot of real estate and they gave it to a lot of arts and cultural organizations and galleries. And that way, they gave it at very low rent for many years, like a decade. Do you think that there's something that we could learn from that in terms of more viability and more vibrancy in our downtown?
Yes. No, I think those are the things like with CODA, like those are the things we could be experimenting with today. I think, the national tenant thing, and I mean, you kind of skip that creative phase, I think, from a development standpoint. Like the Short North did have for a time period, and I think even in Franklinton, they might be on this kind of precipice of maybe skipping a whole cultural, artistic phase, and when the big money development comes in, which isn't a bad thing, but it's something we have to be careful of. So I think we could look at examples like that in Brooklyn, where at the end of the day, it's just, can you afford it or not? When you're a creative, or you're artistic, or you're a retailer, or you're a bootstrapper, not everyone has, the backing to just come into a new white box space in a vibrant urban center. So that's what I think about that.
And I think we have to embrace risk-taking. Remember when City Center was gone, dead, and the idea to turn it into a park? And there were some really strong feelings on either side, and it's successful. So what I take from what you've shared is cities, downtowns have to be risk takers, absolutely, and at the forefront of it.
Absolutely. Basically, the arts and cultural pieces of downtown commercial life more owners need to think about them as amenities, as something that is a draw, that is a value enhancer for a big project. And there are a lot of buildings downtown. I think one of our challenges is the built environment is so established that it's easy for a lot of property owners to say, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. I'm not going to take the risk to do something a little bit different. But again, these spaces, yes, they generate revenue, but at the same time, they really are amenities. They're neighborhood defining. They define our downtown, and they're what make companies want to be downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Bill Wayhoff with Steptoe and Johnson PLLC, and we talked about Easton before. In other communities where there are Easton-like developments, there's residences above the retail, and also the streets are narrow. They're very walkable. Is there any part of downtown that some cities have closed narrow streets, and then made just a pedestrian? Is there any part of downtown that you all think lends itself to that kind of treatment. Thank you.
I think Gay Street would be a great example, for sure. I think when these things happen kind of more naturally and organically over time, they tend to make more sense. I think what we see a lot of times that we're just trying things. We kind of like, we try and create the walkable, cool thing, but there's nothing there, you know? And then it's automatically expensive because we already spent the money to do it. And so I think creating density needs to happen first, and then all that comes after, personally.
And what's wonderful about downtown street system is that we have alleys almost behind every block. And the good part about that is that gives us a lot more room to work with, to be creative with. The hard part is going to be that those alleys get used heavily by a lot of those buildings as places for where they get their deliveries and do other things. So I don't know if there's necessarily a block where we can just shut it down to all kinds of car traffic. But if you look at where we do our farmers market every summer, Pearl and Lynn alleys near Broad and High, I think there's ways to maybe temporarily shut things down or to reimagine the space as a shared space, calm the traffic so that it's safe for pedestrians to go through there, and then also encourage and find creative ways to get other activity happening on the ground floor so that people aren't just walking by blank walls.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, making sure it's the right street, the right place. I mean, downtown is intentional in terms of having a lot of vehicles, bikes, people coming and going. And so I guess I wouldn't want to see a High Street, Broad Street necessarily be viewed as a permanent, shut it down. It's necessary. It's a transportation, it's a critical piece of our transportation network downtown. But certainly done in the right way, I think it can be successful.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Harvey Miller from the Director of Center for Urban Regional Analysis at Ohio State University. And that's an excellent segue into my question, which is about the lack of pedestrian and bike infrastructure in the downtown. We heard about how parking's a constraint. We heard about how driving in downtown is harming the community and harming retail. Why aren't we seeing higher quality infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists, such as protected bike lanes, such as getting rid of two-way or one-way streets and making them into two-way streets, such as lowering speed limits and safer crosswalks? These are small little infrastructure investments that I think would make a big difference in seeing people walk and bike downtown and supporting public transit. So are these infrastructure discussions even on the table?
I mean, I think that we have come a long way, and I know it's a priority, not just of CODA, but of the city of Columbus. And I think that overall, residents, employers want to see that. So, I think about when I started working downtown and the advice I got when I went to lunch in the first week or so to City Center was watch out. The cops here like to ticket jaywalkers. And so, you wouldn't hear that nowadays. And we have good infrastructure. Could it be better? Could third and fourth, be more accommodating to bike riders? I mean, I think there's always room for more discussion in what can happen. And we're going to have to continue to have those conversations because pretty soon it won't be just buses, cars, bikes, and walkers. It's going to be autonomous vehicles, right? So I don't think the conversation really ever ends.
Professor, is it? What, your name, sir?
Harvey Miller.
Are you professor?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay, you look like it, so I was going to say.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Fellow Buckeye. I agree with your assessment and what you think. Because like I'm on High Street, I'm on High and Gay Street. I've been there for a while, and I think that's always been my question. Is that's the single most impactful thing that I think could happen if there were more inviting sidewalks, protected bike lanes, and things of that nature on High Street specifically. And just me, like I'm not a cyclist like Tyler, but I'm a biker. I commute on my bike, but I don't use 3rd and 4th Street bike lanes because it just doesn't feel safe, and there's not much to do on there. So I feel like if we concentrated pedestrian traffic on High Street, where there are retailers and connects all the neighborhoods, it would make a lot more sense, right? And I think there's also room for the autonomous cars. There's also room for CODA. I think the presumption on High Street is that traffic's not great. Like people expect pedestrians, right? Like 3rd and 4th Street feel like highways to me when I'm traveling on them. So I think we could, I mean, just putting the bike lanes on High Street, I think would make a big difference personally.
But, you know, let me play devil's advocate here, because Casey Brandcamp is sitting at the table. She's read studies about the impact of a single parking meter on retail. So you'd give up parking meters?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Huh. That's interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, I'm struggling to make it, and we got parking meters. So how many more parking meters can I add? So that's just the reality. I'd much rather have the vibrancy of people on the street and the bikes going by. That's what we're talking about, the heartbeat of a community. That's what I see. It's not parking. We can add parking meters from here to Timbuktu. It's not really going to move the needle.
I think we all, the city has done a great job. I mean, the fact that we do have the bike lanes on 3rd or 4th, 3rd and 4th is pretty incredible. And I was nervous as well when those went in, and I tried it out a few times, and I actually like biking down 3rd Street into downtown much better than I do on High Street, because there is no protection at all. There's no space that's really defined for you. Not every street can have every amenity, but in streets that are too narrow for us to do bike lanes, if we can calm traffic, that'll help serve the same purpose. A street like Broad Street, however, where we got, I don't even know how many lanes right now in each direction, is there room for bikes, pedestrians, transit, and cars, and proper turns and parking? Yeah, that's a huge, huge street. And I think all of us need to just keep asking the city for more. That I think our bike facilities that have gone in have been very successful, and we just need more of it.
And in the spirit of sort of thinking globally and acting locally, one thing that property owners and managers downtown can do is provide more facilities for bike storage. You know, they're so quick to give out parking spaces that are reserved with the name at the front of the space, and then you're supposed to basically lock your bike to a lamppost. And a lot of people invest a lot of money in their bikes. They want to see them well taken care of. And so obviously there's great work being done in terms of adding bike lanes. We'd love to see more infrastructural investment in making those lanes usable and accessible till we get to the point where there are more people who aren't cyclists but just ride their bike to work. They don't think of themselves as cyclists. They don't go out for long rides on the weekends, but that's how they get to work. But part of that has to be on the private sector as well, in giving people better options for storing their bikes and making, you know, biking sort of something that they can do and that their coworkers do. So
We have time for either one more long question or 2 short questions.
You'll decide if this is long or not. Hi, Eric Davies. This is a great discussion, and I think it's important because downtown, as Mayor Coleman once said, former Mayor Coleman, that downtown is everyone's neighborhood. And I really believe that, but my question becomes then, are we still planning for downtown as if it was everybody's neighborhood? And I think when it comes to housing in particular, I'm really concerned that we're not, and that the housing is becoming more of a market, upscale market. And I think in particular, the demolition of the Grant Oak apartment complex shows another affordable market of housing going away. So my question again is, are we really planning downtown to be everyone's neighborhood?
That's a great question. I think that does need a lot more attention and more discussion with the city. Right now, about 20% of downtown's housing units are subsidized in some way. So that might be single room occupancy at the YM or YWCA, or recent projects that we've had, Commons at Buckingham, Commons at Grant, Hawthorne Grove. Those are all great projects. We're going to need to keep adding to those if we want to keep a healthy percentage of low-income housing. And then there's that middle ground of affordable housing, that it might be market rate, not subsidized, but is it going to be affordable to somebody who is serving the sandwiches at lunch, for example, that we're going to if we're working downtown. And the micro-unit concept is great. We just got to make sure that those are coming in at the right price point and making sure that happens. But it's also a question we got to ask every other neighborhood and really every other municipality in the region. Is our entire region providing for affordable housing so all of our workers have a good place to live?
I want to be the developer's advocate here, because one thing that I think we have to be realistic about in this conversation is just how high the cost of construction is going. It's getting to the point where it's very difficult for some of even these market rate or market leading projects on the residential side to pencil out. And if you want to do something that's affordable from the very start, you really need the stars to align. I mean, you need low-income housing tax credits, you need competitive new market housing tax credits. It's very, very difficult to make that happen. And so that's why actually when I see tax abatements and different incentives in place to build some of the high-end residential that's coming on now. I think that's actually something that's a decision that's tough right now. I think it will look like a very good decision 10, 15 years out, because today's Class A is tomorrow's Class B. And I think really our main challenge right now is to expand the amount of housing stock downtown. And really, as we've seen new product come onto the market, we've seen some of the prices on older housing stock, even if it was built in the 2000s, go down to adjust for that. So I'm hopeful that the market dynamic will address that over time. But right now, construction costs are very difficult.
You know, I'm so sorry to do this to the last person in line. Is there time for one more question? Okay.
You've already touched on the increase in the number of people using biking as a mode of transportation, and I may have missed part of what you said, but there's an article in this month's issue of Outside Magazine about a man who's really promoting, I don't think he's local, but promoting the idea of bike lanes in garages and parking places in garages. And with the explosion and the success of Pelotonia and just other forces, this is becoming more of a biking community and could become much more of a biking community if there were places to, park and better ways to do it. So it's not really a question, it's just a thought. I really think it's important that we focus on that.
Okay. I'll call Kermit Whitfield back up to the stage.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed today's forum, and I hope everybody else here did. Let me just tell you, you can view, if you missed it or you want to tell your friends about this who weren't able to come today and tell them what a great forum it was, you can see all of this. You can see all of this for free. You can view and share today's forum on all of our forums on CTV Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. And it usually takes us a couple days to get this up. So I'd say Friday, beginning of next week at the latest, this one will be up there. Let's thank our sponsors, the Robert Weiler Company, and I'm sorry to say my copy doesn't list their other sponsors. I know their word ones. The Edwards Companies, I believe, and Central Ohio Transit Authority, just going from memory. And of course, our speakers, Laura Kaprowski, Mark Conti, Brandon Givan, Michael Tomko, and Cleve Ricksecker. And thank all of you for being here. There's coffee and cookies. Continue the conversation. See you next week.